Welcome to Anime T23, where we dive deep into the most intriguing what-if scenarios in the anime universe. In today's episode, we explore a world where Naruto-Uzumaki, the future hero of Konoha, is neglected by his own family. But what if this neglect unlocked a hidden potential within him? Join us as we uncover how Naruto's loneliness transforms into his greatest strength. This is What If Naruto Was Neglected by His Family and Had Every Elemental Bloodline, Part 5. Guard duty not treating you well? Naruto jumped slightly in shock. With a soft yell, he fell off the tree branch he was on. He was practicing his blood-style jutsu, trying to form it into a decent-sized ball, before the soft echoing voice reached his ears and he lost control of the jutsu. Naruto hit the ground with a soft thud, his jutsu splashing on him, covering the lower half of his face. Naruto felt his cheeks match the sanguine liquid on his face as he looked up into the beautiful red eyes of Kurenai. Naruto felt his cheeks start to flush deeper as Kurenai covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders trembling as she tried to hold back her giggles. Naruto propelled himself up with his arms and he reached up to scratch the back of his head. "Sorry, Naruto-kun, I didn't mean to scare you," Kurenai said in between laughs, reaching out, and she grabbed onto one of Naruto's arms and pulled him back to his feet. Naruto dusted off his dirty pants until they were clean. Naruto pulled his hand upwards. Using his fingers, he channeled his chakra, removing the blood off from his face as he laughed awkwardly. No, you didn't scare me. Just caught me off guard is all," he said, embarrassed, letting the blood fall onto the floor as Kurenai laughed again. Kurenai looked down at the boy, and her eyes twinkled with a strong sense of mirth. She adjusted her bandage battle dress, wrapping it over her behind, and took a seat onto the dirty forest floor. Kurenai smiled up at Naruto as she patted the ground next to her. Naruto felt his cheeks heat up further as he took the offered seat directly next to her. They sat in silence for a few minutes as they looked out into the dark forest of Fire Country. Both Jinin and Junin were basking in the moonlight as it shined down on them. The beautiful white bats of light shone through the opening of leaves and drawing the two with a comfortable feeling of peace. Naruto titled his head to look at the Junin next to him. She was looking up to the sky. Her expression was calm as she gazed out into the moon. Her knees were up to her chest, with her arms wrapped around comfortable. Her head rested in the center of her arms with her eyes closed shut, letting her shoulders slump down. She looked absolutely peaceful. Naruto felt like he was being hypnotized at the mere sight of her. His heart felt like it was going to explode out of his chest at any moment just from the mere sight of her. Naruto's breath hitched as her eyes fluttered open, blinking several times to adjust to the lack of light and look over into his direction. Her ruby-red eyes reflected the serene moonlight flawlessly as it bounced off of them. The corner of her lips curved upwards into a small smile as she scooted a little closer, leaning downwards, making Naruto hesitantly scoot his head further away. "You know it's rude to stare at a lady, Naruto-kun." Naruto's face, if possible, exploded into the deepest shade of red either of them had ever seen as he snapped his head away from her. Naruto felt his shoulders slumped down embarrassedly as Kurenai softly laughed next to him. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." "It's all right, Naruto-kun. I was just teasing you," she said, bumping her shoulder into his playfully. As she smiled, Naruto smiled back but still refused to look up into her eyes. Kurenai giggled again but stayed in her position, with their shoulders touching against one another. A comfortable silence washed over them as they sat together looking out into the wilderness. Sitting next to Kurenai was pleasant, and he could feel his body becoming less and less tense the longer they were near each other. Periodically, Kurenai would run her hands through her messy black hair, and Naruto would have a hard time not noticing her do it. Whenever she did, a small scent of vanilla and strawberry would waft his way over to him, making him shudder slightly. If she had noticed, she didn't say anything. Instead, she continued to do so until they somehow ended up closer than ever. Kurenai's legs had unspooled and now lay dangerously close to the blonde. Forgetting how to breathe again as her head slightly fell to her side from drowsiness as it landed atop of his. Feeling anxious, Naruto shifted a little but didn't pull away from Kurenai. He snuck a glance in her direction and almost pulled back in surprise when she was staring at him. Naruto smiled awkwardly, and she returned the gesture. Maybe you should go and get some sleep, Kurenai-san. Narumi is getting up soon to take over my shift. Kurenai adamantly shook her head, her hair swinging with her as an even stronger scent of strawberries reached Naruto's nose. I couldn't sleep, that's why I came to give you company, so I'll stay till your shift is over. Naruto felt his heart flutter as she subconsciously snuggled her head further into his head. Naruto this time felt his whole body go red. Whatever Kurenai was doing was killing him, and he actually thought he would have a heart attack at any moment. He had never felt this feeling before. Not even with Shisui, hell, even around Shizuka or Anko. He couldn't pinpoint the exact feeling, but he knew he didn't mind it. He didn't respond, but he did force his eyes away from her. He missed the frown Kurenai had given him as her gaze stayed on him. Hey Naruto-kun, is Narumi bothering you? If she is, we can return to Konoha and have our team shifted around to get her removed. Kurenai said honestly. Even if Naruto was good at hiding his growing annoyance at Narumi during the mission, she would tell by the way his eyes shifted around that she was getting on his nerves. And she was perfectly prepared to return to take them all back to the village if it meant making Naruto's life a little less stressful. Naruto felt touched by the concern in her words. Her tone was soft and he looked at her with a smile as he shook his head. No, this is a good way to get over anything, right? And yes, she's annoying. So damn annoying, but it's just more of a reminder that I'm over all of them. Kurenai blinked in surprise at the sheer amount of confidence in his voice. He didn't waver, and she felt herself smiling along with him, her features softening as she locked eyes with him. Well, if you say so, Naruto-kun. But if it becomes too much, then come and tell me, okay? I have no problem going back. Thank you, Kurenai-san. But really it's all right. And just let her do it, maybe once she gets it out of her system she'll calm down. Naruto said, chuckling to himself at the irony. His laughter died down as he felt Kurenai remove her head from his. Naruto wanted to pout from the lack of warmth as he watched as Kurenai entered her previous position, eyes downcast as she put some distance between them. Naruto frowned. He didn't think what he said would have upset her that much, or at all. He didn't know if he should reach out and ask what was wrong, or just stay silent. He had never been one for comfort, and wasn't really taught how to do it. After a few seconds of awkward silence for Naruto, he hesitantly scooted across the dirt, scratching the back of his head. Hey, Kurenai-san, are you okay? Kurenai looked back at him and almost smiled at his nervous gesture. The smile never escaped, and instead a frown took its place. Her goal was to come out here and tell him what had been on her mind for the past few weeks, but she just didn't know how. Her thoughts were a mess, and she was having trouble sorting through them all, as his sapphire blue eyes looked at her with so much worry it was shocking. Her arms tightened around her legs as she brought them closer to her body. I guess I wanted to apologize to you, Naruto-kun. Huh? Why? Naruto asked confused, his head tilting to the side in question. Kurenai nodded her head sadly. Yes, I should have been there for you when Shisui-san died, she said, clenching her fists. Naruto widened his eyes at her in shock. He was not expecting that. Kurenai looked away, ashamed at herself. I know I was training to be a Junin, and once I passed, I was sent on a 2-year-long mission. But when I got back, I should have been there for you. I heard about the Uchiha massacre, and I didn't look up on you. And you just shared everything about you to me. And I just don't deserve that level or trust from you when I couldn't even be there for you. She finished in a rush, her heart beating shamefully in her chest. She hoped Naruto could feel her guilt. Because she really was guilty, she regretted it more than anything. She felt like she didn't deserve it. She was no better than his family. Then why did she get treated differently? Kurenai felt a soft hand touch hers, and she looked up to see Naruto's hand encircle hers. Her arms loosened up as she looked at the soft blue eyes looking at her. Naruto felt incredibly embarrassed as he did the simple action. His heart was on fire, and he forced the deep blush down to his neck so she couldn't see it. Naruto smiled warmly, making Kurenai even more confused. I think you do. So what if you were busy? At least you were busy, my parents weren't, and the time you spent with me since I got back, and all those years ago was more than I could have asked for. I was happy around you, and you had no obligation to anyway. I was just somebody random you met one day. You're not the one who should feel guilty," he said, surprising even himself as the words flowed naturally out of him. He felt Kurenai's hand tighten in his, and he returned it with a gentle squeeze of his own. The honesty reflecting in his eyes was enough to make the Junin blush slightly as Naruto's own smile grew wider. She felt her nerves and shame melt away the longer Naruto held her hand within his. She felt her own smile growing as she locked her eyes with his. Blue met red with such a display of open vulnerability and affection. "I'll make sure you aren't alone anymore, Naruto-kun. Naruto-kun, are you even listening to me?" Naruto snapped his head upwards, eyes blinking in surprise as he looked at Sasori. Sasori's eyes glowed with annoyance as he scowled, crossing his arms over his chest as soon as he finished zipping up his jacket. Naruto looked sheepish as he forced his eyes away from Sasori, scratching the back of his head with a light blush on his face. Sasori merely rolled his eyes at the blonde. "Sorry, Sasori-sensei, I kinda spaced out there." "Yes, I am aware. Anyway, I'm stepping out for a bit. Watch over the place while I'm gone." Naruto raised an eyebrow at Sasori. Naruto just nodded and responded with a will do, and just like that, Sasori was gone. Naruto had learned that over the years, Sasori would sometimes leave for a day or two saying he had some business to take care, and Naruto now knew better than to ask where he was going. Sasori would never answer the question and would then vanish, and sometimes hit them with a, "none of your business." Naruto was quick to not ask again after those words reached him. Naruto looked down at what he was previously doing. He was seated in a classroom that resembled the Shinobi Academy that he used to attend, but it was much smaller. Sasori, when he wasn't training them on ninjutsu or any of the more advanced shinobi arts, he liked to use the classroom for more teachings, like jutsu making and principles of certain shinobi clans and powers. Naruto always had to suppress a groan whenever Sasori had dragged him and Kisei in this room. It reminded him of his academy days, and he never liked looking back on those memories. Kisei never complained. In fact, she was always elated when Sasori-sensei would teach them here. Since she had never gone to a school before, or a shinobi academy, so all of this was new to her, and was exciting. The only thing Naruto looked forward to during his time in this room was jutsu making. The three of them would usually talk for hours, and try to formulate possibilities and ways to create new and powerful jutsu. It was what you thought the Shinobi Academy was going to be like when you were a kid, and for Naruto, it was damn cool. But over the past year since Naruto and Kisei had joined Sasori, things were finally beginning to calm down for the blonde boy. Kisei was progressing at a very fast rate. She already learned how to use chakra strings with both her hands and added a few earth and wind jutsus into her limited arsenal. Sasori had bragged relentlessly the day he managed to get Kisei to control a small puppet with just the use of her magnet release. It didn't have the best control, and would usually fall to the ground due to Kisei's average grasp on her bloodline, but it was a foot in the right direction, and she was growing each and every day. Naruto was proud of her. She had changed drastically since the first time they had met, and he couldn't be happier. They had spent almost every day together, and even on days off, when Sasori would leave, they would spend them either sparring or just hanging out with one another. And it was great. Sasori had a strict training regime for each of them, and they often trained in 2 different places, since it was dangerous to train near each other. Sasori had helped improve in the area he had been lacking in most, his taijutsu. He was nowhere near the level he wanted to be, but he was much better than he was last year. His speed had increased dramatically ever since Sasori had gone and replaced his old training weights with weight seals that he put on their bodies to improve their speed and usefulness. His blood jutsu was almost second-hand nature to him by now. He had enough control over the art that he didn't have to think about it anymore. His chakra control was a big factor in his control and was easy enough to manipulate. He had spent days and days training until the sun would rise the next morning to fine-tune his chakra control. He never knew how important it was until jutsu's starting to implode on him from his lack of understanding on control. Sasori made sure to beat the information into him, and ever since then, his chakra control was almost perfect. With Isobu, the two of them had trouble getting to the second chakra tail together. After entering the first tail, Naruto felt no pain when he did so. He now only felt pure power and warmness spread through his body. But nothing compared to the pain he felt from entering the second tail. At the memory, Naruto winced in pain, instinctively reaching up and rubbing his bandaged arm. The heat and malice was so strong that the skin on his body would sometimes feel like it would melt away, and sometimes it did. Kisei was horrified that the first time she did it, and practically forced Naruto to stop his training with the demon's chakra altogether, until he was fully healed and in perfect condition to try again. But even after the year, they couldn't get the tail to form. And at this point, Naruto felt like he would end up dying before he did manage to. Sasori tried to help in any way he could, but he didn't know how the inner workings of Jinchuriki worked. Almost everyone's seals were different and operated in a different way, and he was nowhere close to a seal master to decipher the seal Yuno had put on Naruto. And he wasn't so sure he could understand the feeling of skin peeling off the body, so he left the Biju training solely for Naruto, and just supervised so things wouldn't get out of hand. But Isobu would always pull back fast enough so Naruto never had lost control. Something the blonde was incredibly thankful for. His Sharingan had been the biggest change, ever since the terrifying discovery that Sasori was going to basically do a doctor's checkup on him. But even Naruto had to admit that the results were more than amazing. Sasori had explained in depth on what the Mangekyo Sharingan was. It was one part of the final evolution that the Sharingan underwent, and it could only be obtained by killing the person closest to you, or so much mental and physical stress that the Dujutsu mutated normally. But that was rare. Most Uchiha who gained the powerful Mangekyo had slayed someone closest to them. But each Mangekyo Sharingan had come attached with its own unique abilities, two to be exact. Each unique ability was tailored to its owner, and when implanted into someone else's eyes, they should retain the same abilities of the original owner of the Dujutsu. But that wasn't the case with Naruto. Sasori had gone over the date over 100 times, and theorized that when Yuno had sealed the Sanbi and implanted the Sharingan simultaneously, that he actually mutated Naruto's DNA around the Dojutsu. Which is why he was able to activate and deactivate the bloodline at will, unlike Kakashi Hatake, who had to keep it covered up to keep it deactivated. So Naruto didn't hold any of the traits that Shisui had, and instead was given two unique ones, and Sasori was ecstatic. They had worked long and hard for over 6 months, but were finally able to pin down the exact technique Naruto had used against Narumi. And to say Naruto was surprised was an understatement. He was absolutely stunned. They both have named the unique Mangekyo ability, misdirection. It was the ability to shift one's line of sight for a few seconds to allow Naruto to either escape or get in close enough to deal the finishing blow. And they could not fight back against the technique. For how long Sasori had tried it was impossible to not look at what Naruto wanted you to look at. He just couldn't tear his eyes away. The only thing you could do is try and sense Naruto's chakra signature, but you had to be incredibly fast to do so. And most of the time even faster than Naruto himself. And since his control over the Shunshin was nearing insane levels, it was not an easy feat. But that wasn't saying the jutsu didn't come with an Achilles heel. The jutsu had a time limit. Naruto and Sasori had both figured out that the misdirection only lasted for about 5 seconds maximum, and had at least a 5-minute cooldown. It wasn't the worst drawback, but the amount of chakra Naruto had to admit was a lot, and would sometimes leave him fatigued if he held the jutsu for the full 5 seconds. He was getting better at his control over the ability, and was able to hold it for 3 seconds and not feel any fatigue. And because of the use of misdirection, his eye would produce a small stream of blood that he could combo off into a blood-style jutsu in an attempt to end his opponent right there and then. Naruto was slowly starting to become a powerhouse with the Uchiha Dojutsu, something Sasori had also bragged about to Kisei. Naruto and Sasori were still trying to figure out what his second ability was, but they hadn't had much luck in that regard. Most theories they had either came back entirely wrong or had made no sense. It was a work in progress. But Naruto didn't mind the wait. He was looking forward to seeing where his Sharingan would take him, and he thanked Shisui every day for the power. He was broken out of his thoughts as the feeling of something started to tickle his cheek. Naruto gave a small laugh, closing the book in front of him and throwing his arm over his chair to look towards the door. "All done for the day, Kis?" said girl giggled as she retracted her chakra string and nodded happily in Naruto's direction. Naruto laughed again as he watched the girl bounce her way over to him. She was wearing a nice, comfortable black t-shirt with a light gold-covered zip-up jacket over it, perfectly matched with a pair of loose black shinobi pants and black sandals. Her long, flowing brown hair was tied back into a high ponytail and reached just to the end of her neck. Her golden eyes seemed brighter, and several small freckles had started to appear on her cheeks. She smiled wide as she jumped on the table Naruto was sitting at, not even bothering to use one of the chairs to his sides, and instead took a seat on the table. Kisei raised an eyebrow at the book on the table and reached out before Naruto could say anything. Flipping it over, she read the title and she frowned. Turning back to Naruto, she waved the book and pointed at it with her finger. "You actually find this interesting?" Naruto laughed again, quickly taking the book and reaching out and pinching the 9-year-old girl's cheeks. Kisei yelled in annoyance, but didn't try to run away, silently enjoying the attention since she hadn't seen him almost all day. "Yeah, I'll have you know that I'm trying to figure out what my awesome new Mangekyou ability is, so I have to brush up on certain topics. But Naruni, those books are so boring. They always revolve around clans fighting against each other, and it always ends horribly," she said childishly, crossing her arms with a huff. Naruto, upon hearing his new nickname, smiled wide. It was something new that she accidentally had called him during a night of late-night training. He had gone to go and put her to bed when she had a particularly bad nightmare that day. She had refused to leave Naruto's side, and Sasori was quick to leave them, since he wasn't any better at comforting a loud crying girl. Naruto never left her side, and she had called him that once she had finally calmed down and drifted off to sleep. And Naruto couldn't have been happier when he heard those words. Kisei had seemed embarrassed at first, but was happy to see that Naruto didn't mind, and in fact he welcomed it wholeheartedly. And ever since then, he finally became the big brother he had wanted to be. Reaching out, Naruto gently pushed Kisei off the table, and with a yelp she tried to grab onto the table for support. Naruto chuckled as he watched as Kisei hit the ground with a soft thud and glared at him. "You're just jealous I read at a higher level than you." Kisei grumbled as she launched herself at the blonde. Naruto didn't even try to fight back. The young girl latched herself onto his back. Naruto laughed loudly as he playfully mocked the girl for her average reading skills. Kisei had started to grow annoyed and formed thick chakra strings at her fingertips and fully wrapped them around Naruto's mouth. Even the chakra strings couldn't stop the sound of Naruto's muffled laughter as they stumbled through the room and back into the large training hall. Kisei was beginning to enjoy her attack on Naruto until she felt the blonde stop moving. She blinked several times in confusion until she looked up. Her eyes went wide as she was met with two men standing in the center, one looking at them with disappointment and the other's face covered with a mask. "Why does this always happen the second I leave? Can I even leave you two alone?" Sasori said as he put his head in his hand, suppressing the urge to pinch his nose bridge. He had only been gone just over an hour, and they were already getting into hijinks. He swore he was starting to feel more like a father than a sensei. Ever since he had come back one day, and his entire puppy collection had been tampered with. Everything was out of order and thrown across the room, and Sasori had to suppress the urge to actually kill those two. Ever since then, never tolerated them messing around when he was gone. Only under his supervision could they have fun as long as they stayed close by and were out of harm's way. "My God, I do sound like a father." Sasori internally groaned as Kisei quickly jumped off of Naruto's back, her chakra strings vanishing as Naruto straightened up. Neither of the two had seen this masked man before, but they knew if he was with Sasori, then he could be trusted. Kisei stayed planted next to Naruto as the blonde glanced between the two of them. Sasori looked back towards his companion, bowing slightly in an apologetic manner. My apologies, they get like this sometimes, and well. Oh, please don't apologize, Sasori. This was exactly what I had wanted, the man said happily, reaching up and removing his pink mask, letting his pastel pink eyes known to the world. His gray hair was light, almost looking white as he looked down at the two kids. Sasori just sighed as he stepped back, allowing the man to do what he always did. The mysterious man hung his mask on his hip as he walked over and offered both of his hands to the kids. A pleasure to finally meet you, Kisa-san, and of course great to see you again. Naruto-san, my name is Yuno. Apologies for making you wait so long for me. Naruto felt his eyes grow wide with shock at the man. This was the fabled Yuno he had heard so much about. The man who was supposed to meet them here, and who had sealed the Sanbi, and had implanted the Sharingan into him. Kisei wasn't really sure on why Naruto looked so shocked, as she looked up at the man. The girl accepted his handshake with a nervous smile. Yuno just smiled back as he shifted his attention to Naruto. Naruto didn't even bother to return the handshake as he looked at Yuno with his face blank. This was the moment he had been waiting over a year for, to finally figure out who had killed Shisui. Naruto opened his mouth, but before words could escape him, Yunio had cut him off, clapping his hands several times, startling Naruto. Sasori, could you please prepare some tea while I speak with Naruto here? Alone. Sasori masked his surprise at Yuno, but nothingness nodded his head along with him. He agreed and quickly whisked him and Kisei out of the room. Kisei looked like she wanted to fight back, but one look at Sasori was enough to make her rethink her decision. She had seen that look many times when she knew that her sensei was deathly serious. He was almost as serious when she had accidentally broken one of his favorite puppets. After the soft clicking sound echoed into the room, Yuno looked back down at Naruto. The room suddenly got very tense as they stared at one. Waved falling down from the small waterfall was the only sound that played in the room as Yuno walked directly past Naruto. How does a spar sound? Naruto's eyes went wide as he turned to see Yuno had walked all the way across the hall and stood directly in the center circle of one of the training spots. He had just finished removing his blue Atarashi cloak, folding it neatly before placing it on the ground. Naruto was a little apprehensive at first. He knew Yuno had to be strong. Sasori had praised Yuno time and time again for his incredible power, and just from standing across from the man, Naruto could practically feel the heavy amount of chakra flowing from the man in waves. Yuno just smiled as he put his arms out, his eyes closing due to his large smile. Come on, why not? It's my way of apologizing for taking so long to get here, and after we're done, I'll make sure to tell you everything. And that is a promise. Naruto grinned slightly himself as he walked until he was about 20 feet away from the man. Yuno smiled as Naruto had accepted his offer. He could tell the boy was a bit eager to hear the information he had for him. Maybe a little too eager. This was a way to calm him down so Naruto didn't end up doing anything drastic. And it was a good way to see how much the boy had improved since he last saw him. After all, Yuno was the one to give him the push in power. Fine, but after I want to know everything, Naruto said, not taking his eyes away as Yuno nodded, agreeing without a second thought. Of course, Naruto, but please do not hold back. I know all of your powers, and it would be a waste not to use them, Yuno said. Naruto clicked his tongue in his mouth. That was true. He didn't even think about that. He was too preoccupied at seeing Yuno for the first time. Without a second thought, he activated his dujutsu, making the man across from him grin. The grin soon faded away as Naruto was gone from his line of sight. Yuno stayed still as he waited a few seconds to try and figure out where the blonde had gone to. With another smile, he ducked, dodging at seemingly nothing as wind rushed by him, making his hair sway. With a yell of Kai, Yuno had dismissed the blonde's genjutsu, catching Naruto off guard. Naruto quickly performed a sunshine blazing past Yuno in a blur and sending his elbow into the man's gut. Yuno took the hit, and the moment the blonde made contact, Yuno swept at the blonde's feet. Yubo grabbed Naruto's arm so he couldn't get away as Naruto felt his legs fly into the air thanks to the sweet kick. The second Naruto's body hit the ground, it exploded in a torrent of water. Yuno grinned again before jumping away. Naruto came flying down from the ceiling, his hand already stretched out towards his water clone. Water style, Judgment Chain. Yuno raised an eyebrow at the unknown jutsu as he watched the water take shape into a thick heavy chain and wrap itself around himself. Naruto landed on the ground across from Yuno, as the older man just smiled, his face shining with mirth as he tested the jutsu's defense. Naruto didn't even try to hide the disappointment on his face as he tightened his fist slightly, making the chain grip harder around Yuno. Well, that was easier than I thought it would be. You impressed? Yuno laughed as he shook his head, making Naruto frown. It's a good jutsu, but not good enough. Yuno said as he flexed his body, making the jutsu break. Water soared around the field as Naruto's eyes went wide. He had just put enough chakra into the jutsu that should have been enough to stop him in his tracks. Naruto scoffed as he raised his forearm, blocking a punch that had come his way. He felt his eyes go even wider, and barely had enough time to duck out of the harm's way from the katana that tried to slice him. Naruto retreated, shunshining backwards, putting more space between the two of them. Yuno twirled his sword in his hand, swinging it back and forth while doing so. He stuck the sword in the ground, leaning on the hilt as he formed a singular hand seal. Naruto felt his body tense at the motion. Yuno smiled at that. Fire style, Majestic Fireball Jutsu. Naruto watched as Yuno breathed out the biggest fireball he had ever seen. His face glowed from the intense orange ball of heat as he formed his own signs, gathering as much water as he could from the waterfall and formed a large thick wall of water in front of him. The giant ball made contact against the wall ruthlessly. The ear-pinching sizzling sounds echoed in the room as Yuno felt his ears twitch. Looking to his right, he raised his forearm to block a punch from Naruto, who appeared on his right. Hearing the same thing on his other side, he bent down, making another Naruto fly over him and straight into the other body of Naruto. Yuno grinned again as he gripped his sword, sending the blade directly into the two clones, making them, once again, pop into plums of water. Sensing danger, he jumped to his right as the original Naruto came down on him from above. Naruto's fists indented itself into the ground, making a small crater appear as the spinning jujutsu looked annoyed at Yuno. Shunshining again, he appeared directly behind Yuno, who was only mildly surprised by the boy's natural speed. Water style, Water Blast Jutsu. Naruto extended his index finger forward, his hand taking the form of a gun, and a large burst of water exploded from his fingertips. The jutsu impacted Yuno as the impact sent him flying forwards. Yuno reacted quickly. Using his sword, he placed it in the ground as he slid backwards, barely having enough time to jump out of the way from his exact jutsu being used against him. He dodged the fireball, only to be met with the front of Naruto's knee as it impacted with his face. Yuno this time actually winced in slight pain as his knee sent him back down to the flow. Naruto didn't lead up to the attack. Using the waterfall again, he formed a large water dragon that sent itself roaring its way at Yuno. Yuno only tilted his head upwards as he laid on the ground, grinning as the dragon came closer and impacting onto the ground, splashing water upwards. Once the water finally cleared, Naruto noticed that Yuno was nowhere to be seen. Naruto scanned the arena, his body growing more tense as his Sharingan moved around rapidly. A sudden cracking sound broke his thoughts. Naruto below! Naruto cursed as he attempted to jump back, but Yuno had already grabbed a hold of his foot. The rest of Yuno jumped up from under the ground as his own knee impacted Naruto's gut. Yuno, with speed that was almost impossible to follow, with his Sharingan sliced at Naruto's legs. Naruto groaned from the pain as his blood leaked down his wound. Using his moment from his jump, he swung his arm downwards, using the blood from his now fully healed wound on his legs to form a small blood knife and attempted to stab Yuno. Yuno let go of the blonde's foot and brought his sword up to intercept the blood jutsu, but was incredibly surprised that the blood knife never made contact with him. Instead, the blood lost its shape, splashing over his katana and obscuring his vision. Naruto didn't give Yuno a moment to spare. and with another sunshine, continued his assault, sending a chakra punch to Yuno's skull. Yuno's head flew back, and he winced from the pain. Naruto didn't stop there. Using his free hand, he reached out, slicing his own palm against Yuno's katana, making a large streak of blood leave his open wound. Yuno didn't have much time, as the blood formed a large spiral blade and thrusted itself over at him. Yuno rolled out of harm's way. The spiral blade stuck itself into the ground. Naruto had anticipated this, and was quick to act, summoning a few water clones that quickly latched themselves onto Yuno. Two of the clones grabbed his arms while the real Naruto held a kunai to the man's throat. Naruto grinned as he looked down at Yuno. He was feeling pretty good that his plans were actually working against such a strong opponent. He didn't have much time to bask in his glory as Yuno returned his grin. He didn't even look hurt. "Hey Naruto, how do you feel about lightning?" Naruto's eyes widened and he didn't have enough time to back away as Yuno's body suddenly sparked, exploding into a current of lightning, electrocuting Naruto and making his clones die immediately. Naruto screamed as the electricity wrenched itself around his body. He had never been hit with a lightning jutsu before, and it hurt like hell. As soon as the feeling vanished, he had to catch his breath. His hair was sticking up all over the place. Naruto felt his head become wobbly and barely even reacted to Yuno coming up from behind him. Yuno was certainly impressed with Naruto's skill level. He was easily powerful than most Junin, and his plans would almost 100% work against most shinobi. Yep, Yuno was now certain that he made the right choice in sealing away the Sanbi in Naruto and implanting Shisui's Sharingan. He knew the boy would become strong, and this was even beyond his expectations. Yuno walked forward, swinging his sword forward, wiping it clean of the remaining blood as he stalked closer. Yuno raised a delicate eyebrow as he watched Naruto get to his feet, his body still trembling from the amount of electricity he had to endure. But Yuno was surprised to even see him standing. He had put enough chakra into that lightning clone to at least paralyze him for a few hours. Naruto turned his head, his Sharingan now a completely different shape than before, as he glared at Yuno. He formed a blood senbon in his hand and sent it flying towards Yuno, and Yuno himself almost frowned at seeing the attack. The aim was very off, that wouldn't even make it to a target, and there was barely any strength behind it. Then suddenly Yuno, a chill fell down his spine. A feeling he hadn't felt in years expanded to all of his senses as it exploded from Naruto. He tried to snap his head back to Naruto, but found himself unable to do so. His eyes followed the blood senbon, and as it soared past him, his face conforming into a deep look of pain as he gasped, blood flying from his mouth as he was finally able to look down. The gasp died in his throat as the bubbling tail of red chakra latched itself onto his throat. A long tear streak of blood leaked down Naruto's now Mangekyou Sharingan as his golden right shined brightly within his chakra cloak. With a strong force, Yuno was sent flying back, his body moving faster than ever as he impacted all the way into the opposite wall. The base shook from the impact, and several pieces of rock actually started to break and fall from the roof. A large plum of dust hid the way to Yuno's body as Naruto breathed heavily. His Sharingan deactivated as he fell to his knees. He had fully used up all 5 seconds of his misdirection, and he barely had any chakra left, which was why he resorted to Isobu's. He felt his eyes roll back into his head as the chakra cloak receded back into his seal, and he fell to the ground, unconscious. The sound of footsteps echoed down the room as Yuno walked towards Naruto. He was holding his arm, but other than that, he looked completely fine. He looked down at Naruto with a large amount of pride. He didn't think Naruto would actually learn a Mangekyou technique or even have any control of Isobu's chakra. It was choking, he was stunned, and it even furthered his happiness that he had found Naruto on that fateful day. Amazing, I certainly wasn't expecting that. He even broke my arm, and I am definitely suffering from internal bleeding. If I was a lesser shinobi, that definitely would have caved my insides in on themselves. Yuno thought as he picked Naruto up with his free arm and walked down the arena to return with Sasori and Kisei. He had a deal to keep after all. Shh! How weak can you be to not even gather any information? Naruto snapped his head towards Narumi, and he swore for a second. all he could see was red. Naruto had felt rage bubble up in him, unparalleled to any anger he had ever felt before in his life. Naruto barely registered Kurenai's worried gaze and looked at him as she scolded the lone chunin in the room. Kurenai put her soft hand onto Naruto's shoulder as she yelled at Narumi. She herself was beginning to get annoyed at the chunin, and if it wasn't for Naruto telling her to let her do her thing, she would have returned to Konoha and request a new teammate immediately. Naruto didn't even bother to look over at Kurenai. He only had his eyes set onto Narumi's aggressive smirk as hers eyes glossed over with confidence. It had taken everything in Naruto's power to not activate his Sharingan and glare daggers at the girl. His very own sister, as she called him out in front of Kurenai. Naruto growled, all sound muffled around him, and not even the calming words of Isobu had yet to reach him. His hands balled themselves into fists as he took a step forward, and he grew madder as Narumi's smirk only grew. What? Does the weakling finally want that spar? Naruto's eyes flashed dangerously, and this time Isobu had to forcefully interject himself. He was screaming at the blonde to stop and calm down. Naruto barely heeded his words. He could tolerate his family leaving him behind. He could live with the idea of them not in his life. But no one, absolutely no one, would call him weak in front of Kurenai, anyone but her. Narumi's eyes glinted as she watched her brother get closer to her. Her hand was already trembling slightly with excitement as she slowly reached into her pouch, fingering around for a kunai. That is enough. Narumi, I had accepted your attitude long enough. If you don't back off right away, I will be forced to make you. Kurenai yelled, stepping in front of Naruto, surprising both the Namikazes. At the gesture, Naruto was finally able to make out what Isobu had been yelling at him. The calming words finally reached Naruto's brain, and he took a few large and silent breaths. Narumi, seeing Kurenai intervene, scowled. She took her hand out of her pouch and almost glared at the two of them. She kicked off the wall she was leaning against and offered a half-ass apology and left the room, disappointed that her plan had failed. It only was that Kurenai hadn't got in the middle. Then finally she would see how strong her brother actually was. With another loud scowl, she slammed the door shut and left the room entirely, leaving both Naruto and Kurenai alone. An awkward silence bathed through the bedroom as Kurenai turned back to Naruto, who was standing at the foot of the bed. Arms limp at his sides, as he looked at her with a mixture of shock and annoyance. The red-eyed beauty ignored the look, as she bent down to his level, her hand reaching out impulsively and laid itself on his cheek. Naruto wanted to snap away from her touch, but he couldn't. He felt cemented in place as he felt her thumb start to gently rub the bottom of his scar. Naruto's fists tightened at his sides, looking away from Kurenai as he scoffed. You didn't have to do that. I had it under control. You don't have to lie to me, Naruto-kun. It's okay, she said softly, leaning forward until her forehead rested against his. Naruto felt his breathing hitch in his throat, and his body froze as Kurenai's hot breath tickled his cheek. He was annoyed. He was angry at Narumi. He was angry at everybody. And yet, whenever Kurenai was here, the ice around his heart melted away, and he found himself happy again. He stood still for several moments, enjoying the warmth from Kurenai, and he hesitantly gave in, leaning into her touch and putting more of his weight onto her. She didn't seem to mind as they stood in the center of the room in complete silence, both not bothering to talk as they enjoyed the peaceful nature of things. Naruto felt his cheeks start to heat up as what sounded like an angel reached his ears. He perked his eyes up at the sound, coming face to face with Kurenai. Her eyes were closed shut as the angelic melody of laughter played on her pillowy lips. Naruto, like before, had forgotten how to breathe in that very instant. He couldn't take his eyes off of her as she laughed louder, small tears falling down her perfectly pale cheeks. The words flowed from her mouth like a harp, so pure and pleasing to the ear. He felt himself get drawn to her very presence, and Naruto was sure that at that moment her smile had been the most beautiful thing that ever existed, and nothing could ever surpass it. I guess we should have traded her out for someone else, huh? Naruto felt himself groan as his eyes started to flutter open. His head was pounding against his skull, and he reached up and rubbed his temple in hopes to ease the pain. He blinked a few times to adjust his eyesight as he looked up into the dull gray ceiling over his head. He could hear the faint signs of people talking, but he wasn't fully awake yet, and it just sounded like a muffled mess as he used his arm and pushed himself up. His hand made contact with the soft cushion of a couch as he pulled himself up, rubbing the remains of sleep from his eyes as he titled his head to the side, earning a sickening crack. Naruto sighed happily at the feeling. He was beginning to feel his body loosening up, as the muttering had stopped completely, as the occupants in the room looked over at the now awake boy. "Ah, it seems you're finally awake, Naruto." Naruto blinked at being addressed at random. He turned his head to the sound of the voice to see the three people sitting comfortably at a large, circular table. Suddenly the memories flooded back into Naruto like a tidal wave, as he looked over to the gray-haired man who had just spoken to him. Taking a moment to gather his thoughts as he remembered everything, his battle with that Atarashi member, using his Mangekyo Sharingan and Isobu's chakra to deal a devastating blow to the man. Mulling over his thoughts, Naruto felt his eyes narrow suspiciously as he looked the man up and down. "Shouldn't you be injured?" "Oh, me? You managed to break my arm, but it's already fully healed." Naruto felt his eyes widen as Yuno waved his arm casually, grinning as he did so. The blonde's mouth fell open in shock. Yuno managed to take a Biju chakra punch to the stomach and left the fight with only a broken arm? He had no other injuries as he sat comfortable in his chair without a care in the world. Naruto was stunned. Just how strong was Yuno? A normal person shouldn't have been able to even walk for about a week after feeling such an attack. Naruto shook his head as he thought about Yuno's strength. He was sure he had only seen a fraction of it, and that thought alone was terrifying. Naruto was broken out of his thoughts as Kisei yelled to him, bouncing up and down at her own seat at the table as she patted on the one next to her. Naruto smiled and quickly swung his legs off of the couch and made his way towards the free chair next to the lone girl. After taking a seat, Kisei smiled up at him, scooting her chair closer so their shoulders were touching. Naruto chuckled a bit and looked across the table. Yuno was seated comfortably next to Sasori, who was swirling the remnants of his tea in his tiny cup. The redhead looked bored, his chestnut eyes duller than usual as they glanced at the blonde. Naruto only blinked in confusion, and grew even more confused as Yuno laughed slightly. "You have been unconscious for about 2 hours? I was starting to get bored waiting." Naruto just sweat dropped at Sasori's words. Sometimes Naruto just couldn't get a good read on the puppet master. At one moment, the redhead was almost playful, acting like an excited kid on Christmas Day. Then the next, he was brooding and bored, like he had just watched all of his presents get taken away from him and lost interest. It was confusing. Naruto just shook his head as Sasori downed the rest of his beverage. He grumbled slightly as he left the table without a word and made his way back into the kitchen. Naruto watched him bemused and was brought back to reality as Yuno had started to speak. "Sasori can be interesting at times, but under that tough exterior of his, he is quite the prankster." Kisei giggled at Yuno's words as she leaned against the table, nodding her head vigorously. "Yeah, Sasori-sensei had even shown me his puppet collection. He had a lot of very cute. Let me remind you that you had almost destroyed some of those," Sasori said angrily as he returned to his seat with a full cup of tea. He glared at Kisei, making the girl stop her rambling. Kisei pouted and crossed her arms with a huff, mumbling to herself as Naruto and Yuno laughed at the display. Naruto rubbed the girl's head, and her attitude did a quick 180 as she smiled up happily at the blonde. "Now that Naruto is awake, we can finally get down to business." Naruto looked over at Yuno, his hand still playing with Kisei's brown locks as he raised an eyebrow. Naruto took notice of Sasori straightening up his back, and as his eyes turned serious, Naruto nodded his head, acknowledging Yuno's words as he swallowed hard. He was starting to become a little nervous at finally being able to hear what he was waiting for all this time. Yuno smiled as he interlocked his fingers together, covering his mouth as he looked between Naruto and Kisei. "Now, what do the two of you know about our group? That you guys call yourself Atarashi, and have a blue wave on the cloaks you guys wear." Yuno nodded as he reached down onto the floor, picking up his neatly folded cloak and placing it onto the table. He pushed it closer to Naruto, and the blonde examined the cloak. It was a dark blue in color, and the wave on the front was a nice light blue. It was long, possibly going all the way down to Yuno's legs, and would easily slide off of Naruto and Kisei. Naruto felt Kisei grab a hold of the article of clothing as she pulled it closer to herself. Naruto just looked back at Yuno with a questioning gaze, as the girl next to him was amazed at the soft material of the cloak. Yes, our group Atarashi is a counterforce against a terrorist group who call themselves the Akatsuki. The Akatsuki are a group of S-class missing nin from all the major villages, and they are a force to be reckoned with, Yuno said, making Naruto's eyes go wide. Just the thought alone of such power shinobi all under the same leader was intimidating. Naruto had barely come out of most of his fights alive and couldn't imagine what a fight against an S-class shinobi would be like. Sure, he was much stronger now, stronger than he had ever felt before in his life. He just wished he didn't have to fight an S-class shinobi soon. The Akatsuki aren't just a normal terrorist group, though. Their goal: capture and obtain all nine-tailed beasts and use them to take over the world. Naruto felt his blood run cold. Even Kisei had froze as she looked up at Yuno in shock. Kisei's hand reached out instinctively and balled itself around Naruto's sleeve desperately. Her golden eyes looked at Naruto in apparent worry as her grip tightened. Naruto himself was in a deeper state of shock. He was stunned into silence at the mere thought of the possibility. Even Isobu had fallen silent. The giant turtle's lone eye looked down at his reflection in the water. Grief overtaking him at the thought of any of his siblings being held captive from these criminals, and they are already in possession of 5 of the 9-tailed beasts. At Yuno's words, the room turned tense. Even Sasori seemed unnerved. His tea was untouched as his hand tightened around the cup. The room was so silent you could hear a pin drop from any of the adjacent rooms in the frown. The frowned as the words left his mouth, looking down as his fists balled themselves into fists, his nails digging deep into his palms as a small trickle of blood fell down onto the table. Naruto felt Kisei try and get closer to him as he spoke. But didn't you say you were a counterforce? How did they? Naruto's voice trailed off as he noticed the solemn looks appear on the two adults' faces. It was the first time either Naruto and Kisei had seen such a look of sadness strike Sasori. The redhead's grip was so strong, cracks started to appear in his cup. Yuno felt his frown fall deeper as he placed his hand on Sasori's now slumped shoulder. Yes, but the Akatsuki were much stronger than we had originally thought. We had lost almost all of our members. Our leader Sasori, Itsumi, Akira, and myself are the only remaining members of Atarashi. The other 100 had all been killed. Yuno said angrily. He sometimes still couldn't believe that the Akatsuki managed to kill almost all of their members. They were bloodthirsty monsters who didn't belong to this world. He made a vow to himself to kill every last Akatsuki member, to bring peace to the shinobi world and avenge the friends and family he had made within the group. And he would do it, no matter what it took. Naruto was once again stunned into silence. 100 members gone just like that. All killed for the greater good of the world, seemingly all for nothing, since the group was still closing the gap with reaching their goal. But we managed to get an upper hand, as we managed to get away with the Sanbi before the Akatsuki could. We were there when the Jinchuriki was about to die, and he was okay with us taking away the Sanbi before they could. So I was able to sneak away with the Biju in an urn that I carried around for a few months, before I had met you, Naruto. Naruto scowled, his Sharingan flaring to life as it glared at Yuno. He felt like his body was shaking. Things were starting to sound like they were getting worse by the second. Naruto slammed his hands on the table angrily, making Kisei jump in surprise. Isobu had to do everything in his power to hold back his chakra as Naruto snapped. Naruto growled, I'm in this mess all because of you. Why did you have to seal Isobu into me? I didn't ask for this power. You involved me in a battle I was never supposed to be attending. Yuno stayed still as beads of spit landed on his face from Naruto's outburst. He remained completely unfazed and nodded his head. Yes, on the day I found you, I was struck with the idea to seal the Sanbi into you. You were a namikaze, a direct descendant to the Yondaime Hokage, so you were born with talent. No one would have ever expected you to hold the Sanbi, and when Shisui had offered his Sharingan up to you, it had only made the choice even easier. Out of everybody in the world, you were the only one I could see who could not only master this power, but keep it hidden from the Akatsuki. Yuno said, shutting Naruto up. Yuno continued, furthering his point. In a short amount of time you had already almost mastered a Mangekyo Sharingan ability, and even mastered a single tail of the Sanbi. With training I knew you would become a fine shinobi. Naruto went silent, feeling his heartbeat quicken as he fell back into his chair, processing what Yuno had said. He didn't know what he thought about the situation, as he closed his eyes in irritation. On one hand, he was glad he had met Isobu. Because of the demon, he was able to get much further in his shinobi career, and had stopped Naruto from making many bad decisions time and time again. But now, with the knowledge of the Akatsuki out there, everything has changed. Naruto would no doubt have to come into contact with an Akatsuki member and fight for his life. And if he had lost, then it meant more than just losing his life. No, it put the whole world in jeopardy. His death could very much be the catalyst to the world ending. And Narumi and Natsu. At that thought, he grew even more annoyed. They were both Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. He had no attachment to them as a family. Like he had told Narumi, they are strangers from here on out, and most likely forever will be. But that doesn't mean he wants them to die, and they were publicly known as Jinchuriki throughout the elemental nations. And being the kids of one of the strongest Hokage in history painted a big target on their backs that they would probably never outgrow. Looking back up at Yuno, he narrowed his eyes, his Sharingan now into his new Mangekyo state, as he stared at the Atarashi member. "And I'm assuming you want me to join this group of yours?" Yuno smiled. Naruto was smarter than he originally thought. He nodded his head. "Indeed. I had wanted to recruit you and Kisei into Atarashi since I believe with you two we could finally put an end to the Akatsuki once and for all. And what makes you think I would join willingly? And I am damn well not allowing Kisei to be brought into this way of life. I would rather die than let anything happen to her." Naruto said confidently, his eyes never wavering off of Yuno as Kisei gasped slightly. Even Sasori seemed surprised at the blonde. Running his hand through his red hair as he watched Kisei look at Naruto with a huge amount of worry. Kisei tightened her grip on his sleeve, pulling herself closer to the blonde. Naruto lost his serious look as he looked down at Kisei in worry. He asked what was wrong and Kisei shook her head violently. "No, I can't just do nothing while a group goes after you, Narumi. I couldn't live with myself if they managed to take you away from me. That's why I won't let you leave without me, and I can fight with you." All the people present felt their eyes widen, and Naruto looked down at Kisei in shock. Kisei buried herself deeper into his chest as Naruto wrapped his arms around the girl, a few tears falling out of his eyes as he held her tightly. He whispered in her ear that he wouldn't go anywhere, and he would always be here for her. The two Atarashi members watched the scene play out in front of them rather fondly. Especially Sasori. He would never admit it, but he had started to care for the two kids more than he had thought he would. They helped fill the void in his empty heart as more and more of his Atarashi members had passed away. They had reminded him how good it felt to be himself. He smiled at the display. Those two really did care for each other. Perhaps Yuno was right on making the call to have Naruto take her all the way here. "You know, Naruto, at the end of the day, it is still your choice to join us. I will not force you, but I do believe that you two could help change the shinobi world for the better." Naruto peeked over at Yuno. He rubbed Kisei's back soothingly as he pondered what Yuno had said. He already had the power sealed inside of him. Not going with the group wouldn't benefit anyone in the long run. If he didn't go, then he could perhaps keep Isobu a secret for a little while longer. And hell, it was already outstanding that he had managed to keep his Sharingan and blood style a secret for so long. Naruto had expected that Narumi would have jumped at the chance to make his powers known to the world as soon as she returned to Konoha. But that wasn't the case. He had appeared in the bingo book under a regular capture order. The entry had no info about his powers, and in his opinion, he really didn't care about hiding them anymore. He was proficient in them, well enough to not really care about the secret. But it was a welcome surprise. But if he did think about joining Adarashi, it would be just another way to become powerful enough to protect those close to him. Like he had said before, he would rather die than let anything happen to Kisei, and that also went for his friends back in Konoha and Kurenai. He pondered the idea some more, letting it soak in his brain as his eyes wandered between the two Adarashi members. The longer he thought about it, the more clear the answer became for the blonde boy. But he wouldn't give in so easily like he had done in the past. He was different than he used to be. He had a purpose now, people to protect, and that meant more to him than his life. He was done getting pushed around. Itsumi had played him like a damn fiddle, and he was not about to follow the Pied Piper again. I will think about joining your group, but on one condition. Yuno kept his face blank as he stared at Naruto. He traced his finger against the mahogany table as he nodded. He was curious about what Naruto had wanted from them, but he was eager to hear the boy out. So Yuno nodded his head. Naruto thought about what he wanted to say. He knew he was already promised this, but it was a way of cementing the information into stone. Like he said, he was done being played with. And knowing slightly how Adarashi worked and thought, by normal means, his question would have gone unanswered like before. I want to know who killed Shisui-san. I want to know everything about that day, down to the last detail. And I want your word. Kisa's safety is my #1 priority. I will no doubt leave anyone if it means I can save her. After I hear everything, then I will make my decision. Yuno smiled, leaning forward as he interlocked his fingers again. He ignored Sasori's flabbergasted expression and nodded his head at Naruto. Naruto felt like a weight got lifted off his body as Yuno gave his acknowledgement to his demand. It was far-fetched, but it helped seal away any doubts Naruto was having about the group. So far, Naruto only trusted Sasori out of the 3 Adarashi members he had met. He hated Itsumi more than anything for what he said he would do to Kurenai, and Yuno had burdened him with a power that was getting chased down, forcing him into a war he wasn't prepared for. Very well then, Yuno said, scooting closer to the table as all present stared at him in anticipation, but no one more than Naruto. Naruto was dead silent. He was finally getting what he was waiting for, what had been plaguing his mind since he had got here. He could feel his breath hitch as he watched Yuno's mouth open up. His palms had started to sweat, and he wasn't sure if Isobu's calming jutsu would have any effect on him at the moment. His name is Danzo. Danzo Shimura is a figurehead on the Konoha Council. He is the one who had killed Shisui Uchiha. Naruto remained silent as he stared at Yuno, and everything around him seemed to fade away into nothingness. Finally, after all these years, he had a name for the faceless man who killed his Nisan. He felt his heartbeat quicken and his blood turn hot at the mere mention of his name. Danzo Shimura. Naruto muttered angrily, his dojutsu spinning widely in his socket. Yuno nodded his head. Yes. Sadly, I do not know all the details of that night that had caused Danzo to kill Shisui, but I was in Konoha doing some business when I had seen you, Naruto, sneaking out of your bedroom window and running towards the Uchiha district. I had trailed you out of pure curiosity, until Danzo had sliced your eye open. I was quick to intervene after that, saving you and Shisui, but Shisui had already lost too much blood and his right Sharingan eye had already been gouged out. Danzo took his Sharingan, Shisui's Sharingan, and killed Nisan. Naruto mumbled out. His words sounded more like a ghost of a whisper as they flew from his lips. His blood was burning with such intensity, he felt like he was going to pass out from the feeling. His nails dug themselves into his palms, drawing small trickles of blood to seep down to his knuckles. His Sharingan eye was wide and all he could see was the final memory he had of Shisui. The smiling boy that had done everything for him, who had helped him when no one else did. Naruto stood up abruptly from his chair, surprising everyone but Yuno as he walked towards the door. Kisei called out after him, asking him what the problem was as she jumped out of her own seat to follow him. Kisei stopped dead in her tracks as Naruto's body exploded into a vile red chakra cloak. Naruto's multicolored eyes stared at Kisei. A look of pure anger coursed through him as his enlarged nails tried their very best to pierce the cloak around him. I'm going to go after Danzo and make him pay. It's his fault Shuini-san is dead, and it's his fault the Uchiha clan were wiped out, Naruto said darkly. The last part of that was more of a hunch on Naruto's part. But it was the only reasonable explanation that had presented itself as to why Danzo, a member of the council, had wanted the Uchiha clan gone. I very much advise at least leaving tomorrow then? Give you time to cool down and think about what you are doing, what this means. This time Sasori spoke up, standing up from his chair and putting his hand in his chest. His chestnut eyes glossed over with a small shred of worry before it vanished completely. Naruto just looked over at the puppet master annoyed. I think that's for the best, Naruto, and I had a few techniques I still needed to show Kisei, and I can get her ready for tomorrow. Naruto shook his head at Sasori's words as he glanced over at Kisei. His chakra cloak had started to recede back into his seal, but his previous anger still very much remained without the chakra. Blinking the gold away in his eye, he spoke. I don't want Kis to come with me. Something can happen. I already said I'm not leaving you, Narumi. Either I go with you, or you're not going at all, Kisei said confidently, her own golden eyes never faltering as she stared right back at her Narumi. She was going to be stubborn about this. She had already lost one brother who had gone insane, and she was not going to lose another one. Naruto wanted to scowl at her words, but he couldn't bring himself to do so. Yuno's face was the only one not showing any signs of emotions as he looked at Naruto, trying to get a read on his own inner conflict. The room was silent as they awaited Naruto's answer. Almost too silent that Kis had started to fidget slightly in place. Naruto sighed before deactivating his dujutsu, turning his back to the rest of them as he placed his hand back onto Kisei's head and softly brushed her soft brown locks to the side. Sasori let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, and Yuno just smiled. Fine. But tomorrow, we make our way to Konoha. The next day, 6 a.m. You're progressing well, Kisei, Sasori said, wiping a thick gleam of sweat from his brow as he turned his head back to the adorable brown-headed girl. The next words had all but died in the Adarashi member's throat as he looked at Kisei. A deep frown was etched into her face as her hand mindlessly controlled a puppet, making it run from side to side with a faraway look in her eyes. Sasori wanted to sigh at the expression on the girl. She had been like that since they had started training, and it looked like it wasn't going away anytime soon. While she was still heading all of his instructions and following the training regimen, her mind was most definitely elsewhere. Kisei, what's on your mind? You look distracted, Sasori said as he took a seat next to the unmoving Kisei. Kisei looked up at the redhead beside her, and her frown only deepened. She put the hand down that was controlling the puppet, and sighed. The puppet was still active as it curled itself around Kisei. As she rested her head in her palm, her eyes slowly shifted from Sasori and back to the large mountain that their base was hidden within. Her free hand mindlessly playing with a few strands of grass beneath her fingertips as they sat out in the forest next to the cabin. I'm worried about Narumi. He was acting kinda scary last night after he found out who killed Shisui Jiji. And I just don't want him to do something he would regret. Sasori's eyes softened, and he slowly nodded his head along with her, leaning back and raising his head to look up into the endless blue sky. There wasn't a single cloud that blemished the beauty, and Sasori silently marveled at the scene. He gently patted Kisei on the head. I know what you mean, kid, but this means a lot to him. I know. I'm just a little worried. Sasori chuckled as he shook her brown hair a little more. Kisei stifled a giggle as she tried to push the older man's hand away. Sasori just chuckled at the scene. He sometimes forgets that Kisei was only about 9 years old. She acted much older than she let on, and had an air of maturity that she kept up for most of her life. Of course, she still acted like a kid, but it was little moments like these that always surprised Sasori, and he wasn't sure if he could get fully used to it. Well, that's why you're going with him, right? To make sure that blonde idiot doesn't do anything stupid? Kisei giggled again and smiled at Sasori. Her smile suddenly turned mischievous as the puppet around her clicked rapidly. Sasori then yelped out in surprise. Looking down to see the little boy puppet that had wrapped itself around Kisei had its mouth open and was biting down hard on one of his fingers. Sasori felt his eye twitch before glaring at the young girl. Kisei just laughed it off as she took off, running back to the cabin. Sasori yelled after her as he held his sore finger. He silently cursed to himself as he quickly caught up to Kisei, who was giggling furiously. He swore he would never get used to a puppet that acted on its own, but at least she made good enough progress that she made no indication of even controlling the metallic boy. Sasori quickly grabbed the girl by the collar and picked her up. Kisei didn't even try to fight back as he did so, too busy laughing as she looked up into the sky. Sasori was about to scold the girl, but the second he opened his mouth he noticed that Kisei wasn't even looking at him, blinking in surprise as a sudden caw echoed into the early morning air. He raised his eyebrow and quickly asked Kisei what was wrong, and was even more confused as the girl kept her gaze into the sky, her golden eyes tracing something as a small shadow obscured most of his face. Naru-ni once told me that Shisuijiji would often get distracted when crows circle around them. Sasori felt his whole body freeze over at Kisei's words. He hesitantly raised his head upwards, squinting his eyes a bit as the glaring sun almost blinded his vision completely. Just as he finally adjusted, he felt them grow wide. His blood ran cold in his veins as Kisei's words echoed in his mind. She was right. There were about 6 crows cawing loudly as they flew aimlessly above their heads in the empty sky. Sasori put Kisei down in a flash, almost disorienting her at his speed. Kisei was about to ask what the matter was when Sasori quickly spun on his heel, looking back into the forest they had just run out of. Kisei watched in confusion while Sasori was trying his best not to sweat. Internally he was trying to calm his beating heart. There is no way. How could? His thoughts were cut off as his breath hitched in his throat. He heard Kisei gasp next to him as they watched a black silhouette slowly make their way towards them. Sasori felt his body stiffen as he took several breaths to calm himself down. He reached behind him, taking the large scroll on his back and swinging it open. The footsteps only grew as the mysterious figure got closer to them and stood right under the glaring sun. Kisei grabbed the cloth of Sasori's pants as the figure finally stopped its trek towards them. Sasori slammed his open palm into the scroll as a tall human-like puppet exploded from the scroll with a poof. The puppet looked to be a man who stood just about 6 feet tall with short arms as it floated above the ground, already connected to Sasori's chakra strings. Sasori and Kisei looked forward at the man standing across from them. He was tall, taller than Sasori, as one of his arms rested just outside the zipper in his coat. His pure black cloak swayed in the wind as the top half of the cloak covered his lower face from view. He had a scratched-out Konoha headband over his forehead as his long black bangs parted in the center and framed his handsome face. Sasori pushed his arm out to shield Kisei from the man, and she gasped loudly as the deep red clouds finally became visible to her. "Don't look into his eyes, kiss!" She quickly nodded, fighting the urge to suddenly look into the stranger's eyes before forcing her head to the side. Sasori didn't have any time to let out a sigh of relief as he looked at the familiar man in front of him. He took a quick step forward to get in front of Kisei as he looked towards the man, making sure he didn't look into the glaring red tomoe spinning in his sockets. "What the hell are you doing here, Itachi?" Sasori said, making it sound much less like than a question as he glared as the now-dubbed Itachi stood menacingly in front of the two. This wasn't good. If a member of the Akatsuki had finally found them, then things could quickly turn terrible. The breeze offered a much-needed catalyst for Sasori as it helped calm his growing nerves. Out of almost everyone in the Akatsuki, Itachi was the one he feared fighting the most. And if Itachi was here then, where is your partner? Sasori said as his eyes flickered around the forest. Itachi kept his face stoic, as he kept his eyes trained on Sasori, his Sharingan slowly going back and forth between the redhead and the mysterious girl with him. She didn't look familiar to the older Uchiha. In fact, he had never seen her before in his entire life. But she seemed important to Sasori, judging by the fact that he thrusted himself between the two of them. Itachi barely registered what Sasori had said since he was too into his inner musing. He had never known that the puppet master actually cared for other people. Kisame is here, but he has another mission, Itachi said as he pointed to the tall mountain next to them. Sasori felt his heart sink as he followed his finger. Kisei wasn't much better as she actually gasped in terror. The second, all eyes made contact with the mountain as small explosions reached their ears. Then several rocks started to fall down the mountain, followed by a thin layer of smoke. Naruni? Kisei yelled as she quickly escaped from Sasori's tight grip on her. She didn't hear Sasori call out for her to stop as she ran forward. Her whole body was jumpy as fear flowed itself through her veins. She didn't get very far, as Itachi was quickly in front of her. She didn't have enough time to react as the older man tightly slapped his hand over her mouth and swapped her legs, sending her crashing into the ground. Sasori called out to her again as he twitched his fingers and sent his puppet soaring towards Itachi. The uchiha didn't even bother to move as he watched the puppet's arm shoot itself forward. A small tube became visible, and Itachi didn't seem fazed as he gripped Kisei's long brown hair tightly and held her in front of him. Sasori grunted at the cowardly way to not get hit by the attack. With another flick of his finger, the puppet did a barely roll, swinging a blade out of its arm as it attempted to cut Itachi. The uchiha was too quick, though. He threw Kisei to the side as he placed his palm on the ground and jumped over the blade that swung at him. Before the puppet could even act again, Itachi took off towards Kisei, his eyes wide as the young girl snapped her head up and raised her hand outwards. The moment she looked up, however, she briefly caught the spinning tomoe in his eyes as her arm slumped back down, her eyes rolling backwards as she fell to the ground unconscious. Itachi didn't even bother to catch her falling body as she hit the ground with a thud. Sasori growled, commending his puppet back to his side as the two men stared at one another. Itachi just looked at Sasori with a blank expression. The redhead returned. But internally, the uchiha was confused. He wasn't aware the puppet master had a secret life that they were all unaware of. It was quite concerning for Itachi to learn this way, which is mainly why he had sent his partner to the base without him. Itachi silently mused again at the look of irritation that flashed in Sasori's eyes. He had never seen that expression ever in Sasori. "It seems you are a traitor, Sasori. What a shame. The Akatsuki really benefited your membership." Sasori growled again at the man's comment. His free hand tightened into a fist as his eyes glanced between Kisei and the mountain. He didn't know what Naruto was up to. Kisei and him left pretty early in the morning, and Naruto was still asleep when they left. Kisei seemed fine. It didn't look like Itachi had used one of his psych-altering genjutsu, and looked relatively okay. Yet he was worried. He wasn't expecting to be found, at least not this early. He silently bristled at Itachi's comment. Yes, he was a member of the Akatsuki. Keyword was. Yuno had found him before the Akatsuki had, and the only reason he joined with the criminal organization was because of Itachi. Clenching his fists tighter, he clicked his tongue. "Yeah, well, it seems you're going to have to go along without me. That damn group is nothing but monsters." Itachi quickly wiped his face of any surprise that might have leaked through into his expression. That certainly wasn't what he was expecting. Itachi stayed stoic as Sasori's eyes periodically glanced back to the mountain. There was someone important in there, Itachi silently thought to himself. Sasori looked worried, more worried than he had ever seen the man, and that was saying a lot since he had only seen the redhead act seriously. "I see. Then I'm sorry, Sasori, but you will have to die here. I'll like to see you try." With Naruto before the attack, Naruto woke up with a jolt. His body felt like it was on fire as sweat poured itself down his brow. His breathing was heavy and erratic as he tried his best to calm his rapidly beating heart. His hand flew over his chest and gripped tightly around the fabric of his clothes as he tried to desperately grab his heart. His little episode didn't last long as he felt his body start to calm down as the familiar heat of Isobu's chakra entered through his coils. He breathed a sigh of relief as he lowered his hand from his chest and back onto his bed sheets. He thanked the demon, and after a few seconds he swung out of bed and walked into his connecting bathroom. Once he entered the restroom, he quickly paced by his reflection in the mirror. He did a double take as he looked at himself. He raised one of his hands and rested it just under his left eye, feeling moistness as a few silent tears fell from his scarred eye. "I'm crying?" "You had a partially bad nightmare last night, Naruto." Naruto was shocked at Isobu's words. A nightmare. He didn't even remember dreaming last night, let alone having a full-blown nightmare. But it explained his strange awakening today. It had been a while since he had woken up in a cold sweat, and even longer than he remembered waking up crying. What was it about? Naruto was surprised at Isobu's lack of response. It was concerning slightly to the blonde, but he didn't press the issue. Isobu, on the other hand, was still in a small state of shock, and he was barely even remembered to help calm Naruto down. The nightmare, it was the worst the blonde had ever had, and was happy that Naruto didn't have any memory of it. So he decided to stay silent. It was something he wouldn't repeat to Naruto. For how much he loved Kisei and longed for Kurenai, it would only break his heart of what he dreamed of. It didn't take long for Naruto to finish getting ready, no longer than 10 minutes. Naruto was freshly showered and ready for the day, dressed in his usual attire. He was wearing a similar jacket to Kisei's, but it was fully zipped up to his chest, leaving the top half of it open to reveal the fishnet shirt he had underneath. He had on a matching set of black shinobi pants, with a nice shade of olive shinobi sandals. Walking back into his room, he was about to exit into the main hall when he glanced back at his dresser. He stood in the doorway for a few minutes as he looked at the neatly folded Konoha headband on his desk. The metal was still perfectly slashed out, and the dated cloth looked clean, only sacred from age. With a heavy heart, he went back and grabbed the headband and tied it securely over his head. He usually opted to leave the headband behind, since it made no difference to wear it while training. But since he was returning to Konoha, it was a must to wear, even if it was a tad suspicious. Not that it mattered much. The second he took a step into Fire Country, he was a target. After exiting his bedroom, he made his way to the main hall. As he walked, he took note of how, quote, the room looked. Usually Kisei was already up and starting training with Sasori, while Naruto practiced his training with Isobu. But today seemed different. Not a single soul resided in the cave, and as he walked into the main hall, he looked back at the table they all had occupied last night. He raised an eyebrow at the table, noticing a small slip of paper folded neatly in the circular table. Walking over, he gripped the page between his fingers and flipped it open. "Naruto, me and Kisei are going out into the forest for some early training before you two leave today. I hope you don't mind. Also, Yuno wanted me to tell you that he left something for you in the training hall. He left last night after you and Kisei had gone to sleep. We will return before lunch." Naruto quickly scanned over the note and threw it back on the table. He wasn't too surprised that Yuno had left so soon after telling them the information that he had promised, so he didn't really care that he was gone. As long as Kisei and Sasori were back then, they would leave. Just the mere thought of finally getting ready to leave back to Konoha was getting him excited. Danzo would pay for what he had done to Shisui. He would pay. Naruto then made his way to the training hall. Sasori did mention a gift, and he was slightly curious as to what Yuno would leave him. Yuno didn't seem like a gifty kind of guy, so it must be something pretty important. As Naruto was walking, he couldn't stop the adrenaline rush that coursed through his veins. The longer he walked, the more he thought about just leaving Kisei here and running off to Konoha. It would ensure her safety, and she could stay with Sasori. She still had a lot to learn, and while he's finally killing Danzo, she could become much stronger. Naruto thought about this hard last night too, before he had drifted to sleep. Kisei's safety was still his #1 priority, even more than Danzo's death. So if she could stay here, it would just make things go much smoother. Pushing through the door into the training hall, he took a step into the room, and he froze. A sudden chill sparked down his spine. The room felt heavy, much heavier than it had ever felt before. It was like walking through a desert as he looked around the room. His eyes scanned carefully as the heavy feeling seemed to only grow with each passing second. The waterfall he had grown used to had stopped falling, and he silently missed the rhythmic sound as the room flooded into silence. Naruto, someone is here with us. I know, but I can't pinpoint their location. Naruto internally responded. It was faint, but he could definitely sense a faraway chakra center in the large room. The chakra felt as heavy as the room as it moved from place to place around the darkened training area. The chakra was potent and thick, and just from the glimpse he was sensing, he could tell that it was the largest pool of chakra he had ever come across. Naruto thought about activating his Sharingan, but quickly squashed that idea. It was still a secret, and it would most likely catch whoever had snuck in here off guard. Then for a split second, Naruto sensed it, the moment he took a step forward. A massive force invaded his senses as he performed a quick shunshine to get away. A loud bang rang through the cave, making the stone around them shake from the force. Naruto struggled to gather his footing from the man-made earthquake as he looked back to where he was standing. He felt his eyes go wide as he looked at the man who now stood in his place. His pitch-black cloak swung in his gust as his leg embedded itself in the ground, physically caving itself into the stone as a crater now stood in place of the blond boy. Naruto then saw it, the glowing red clouds that adorned the man's cloak as he turned to meet Naruto's eyes. The man's whitish-blue skin glinted in the dark as his mirror-white eyes gleamed with amusement. Forcing his foot out of the stone ground, he smirked at Naruto, his sharp teeth shining dangerously as what looked like gills flapped under his eyes. You are quite fast for a kid, color me impressed, the man said with a playful tint in his voice. Naruto felt his heart rate speed up at the man. He couldn't take his eyes off the flowing red clouds on his cloak. An Akatsuki member? What the hell are they doing here? Naruto thought, as he looked back up to the man's spiky black hair and the slashed-out Kiri headband around his forehead. The man raised his shark-like eye at the blonde as he looked Naruto up and down. You're a missing nin from Konoha? How interesting, he said, narrowing his eyes at the boy. Naruto didn't respond as he stood his ground across from the blue man. Naruto, whatever you do, you cannot use my chakra. They should have no idea that I'm sealed in you. Naruto nodded, ignoring the man's words as he agreed with Isobu. Whatever the reason for the Akatsuki being here, it was no way related to him. None should know about his status as a Jinchuriki, except Adarashi and Narumi, and she had kept that a secret for whatever reason that he was still uncertain on. Naruto straightened his posture as he flipped a kunai out of his pouch before glaring at the man. The shake-like man just grinned at the blonde in response. What are you doing here? Well, me and my partner have been looking for Yuno for about a year, and we finally have caught wind of him here, he said truthfully. There wasn't any need to lie about that after all. Naruto hid his surprise as best as he could. He had recalled Yuno saying that he had swooped in and took the Sanbi before the Akatsuki could get to him. So they were probably tailing him to get the tailed beast into their possession. Sorry to break it to you, but he's already long gone. Oh, that's too bad. Then I guess you wouldn't mind telling me where he went? Either that or I kill you here and now. Naruto scowled at the threat as the man just grinned evilly. Naruto didn't even bother responding as he performed a quick shunshine, appearing just to the left of the shark-like man, aiming his kunai to his side. The man's grin just widened as he quickly turned his back to the blonde, letting the kwani come into contact with the large, wrapped-up sword on his back. Naruto smiled confidently as his blade made contact. His smile soon faded away as the sword he had hit swung upwards, a large mouth appearing from the front of it as it tried to attack the blonde. Naruto sunshine again, this time appearing just above the blue male as he sent a sweep kick downwards. The man saw this coming from a mile away and tilted his body backwards, dodging the kick before sending his knee crashing into Naruto's stomach. The man looked somewhat surprised as the boy's body poofed away into a large ball of smoke. The smoke completely obscured his vision as he grabbed the hilt of his sword and brought it forward. With a single slice, the smoke cleared away, leaving the room empty again, as Naruto stood perfectly still in his previous spot. The man grinned again. Sorry, but Genjutsu doesn't work against me and Samahata, he said, as the sword opened its mouth again and nodded. Naruto looked somewhat disgusted at the sword. He had never seen such a thing before, and it was almost scarring. The name is Kisame, kid. Make sure you remember, since I'm the one who's going to kill you, Kisame said as he grinned again. He vanished completely. Naruto stood shocked for a moment at the man's speed, and didn't have enough time to block the knee that impacted his gut. Naruto gasped in pain, but he tried to hold his ground. Using the kunai he had taken out earlier, he thrusted it deep into Kisame's leg. Kisame didn't even seem fazed by the kunai entering his leg as he punched Naruto across the face, sending him flying down the room. Naruto grunted as he flipped in the air and landed back into his feet. He looked over to see Kisame easily take the blade out of his leg and toss it across the room. A small layer of blood leaked down his leg as he ran a tongue over his sharp teeth. Naruto scowled before going through hand seals. Water-style shark attack. Naruto yelled as he took off, running to the now desolate pond that the waterfall used to fall into. Two large sharks made of pure water formed and took off, soaring towards Kisame. The blue man just laughed loudly as he grabbed Samahata tightly and brought the sword forward as he took the attack head-on. Samahata opened his mouth, and the water sharks receded back into nothing as the sword absorbed the attack. Naruto watched in surprise as the sword then grew several inches in size. Naruto scowled, performing another sunshine, appearing to Kisame's left side. Kisame, having seen the blonde, just grinned and brought his arm upwards to block the kick sent his way. Naruto bent his body backwards until his hand reached the floor, and he spun quickly around and smashed his opposite foot into Kisame's face. His foot connected to Kisame, but it barely seemed to affect the man as he grabbed Naruto's foot and attempted to throw the blonde away. Naruto acted quickly as he formed a singular hand seal with his free hand. Blood style. Blood pike. Kisame widened his eyes in surprise at the unknown jutsu as a sharp pain registered itself into his leg. He yelped as he looked down to his previously wounded leg, only to see a large skinny pike made of blood pierce through his leg and go all the way through to the other side. He was so caught off guard that he didn't have enough time to dodge the blast of water the Naruto shot from his fingertip as it impacted with his chest and sent him flying back into the room. Kisame lost his grin and scowled as he got back to his feet. He quickly brought Samahata to his leg, letting the sword eat away at the jutsu and blood at his leg. It had been a long time since he got actually mad at an opponent, and he surely didn't expect it to be some dumb brat. After his leg was blood-free, he gave chase, using his sword to swipe at the blonde's side. Naruto sidestepped the attack, sending another blast of water from his finger. Kisame just brought his sword around to absorb the attack as he rammed his shoulder into the boy. Naruto gasped again as he skidded backwards. Using another sunshine, Naruto blasted past Kisame, swiping a kunai towards his body, but was intercepted by Kisame's larger sword. Samahata then grew again, swirling around Naruto's arm rapidly. Naruto tried to use his sunshine again but was too late, and the sword took a bit into Naruto's stomach. Naruto yelped in pain and forcefully brought his feet upwards, kicking the blade away and shunshining away. Standing just 20 feet from another Naruto flew through hand signs, but quickly stopped as he watched Kisame's sword start to roar in what seemed like pain. The scaly blue sword started to grow in size again, until it was about the size of Kisame now. The blade's tongue was stained red as it cackled again. Kisame himself didn't look too good. His white eyes were wide open in complete disbelief as he shakily looked back into Naruto's direction. Naruto was on edge as he kept his hands sealed up. His chakra was already molded and was ready to attack, but Kisame seemed to be acting strange. His sword was wailing loudly, and now Naruto couldn't tell what kind of emotion the sword was feeling anymore. Samahata finally seemed to have calmed down a bit, but the pressure that Naruto had felt when he first entered the room had returned full force. The air was suffocating. Kisame's potent chakra was starting to roll off his body as they continued to stare at each other. Inside of you, you're a Jinchuriki. Naruto felt his eyes widen. His mouth fell open in shock as Kisame grinned. Samahata flared widely as Naruto's throat went dry. Naruto tried to school his expression as he tried to think of anything he could say to Kisame. He was confused. He was shocked. Even Isobu's mind went blank at Kasame's words. Kasame's just gave a crazed smile, his sharp teeth glinting dangerously. Yes, yes. Samehada recognized the taste of the Sambi's chakra. Naruto felt his blood run cold as he looked down to his stomach. A part of his shirt had been ripped off from the sword biting him. His seal was still invisible, but several teeth marks were etched into his skin. A bad feeling made its way into Naruto's body. This was bad. This was very, very bad. This wasn't at all how it was supposed to go. His mind was traveling a mile a minute as he tried to find an excuse that would work. Me? A Jinchuriki? Please, you sound crazy. You can't trick me. Samehada knows this chakra anywhere. He was the one who almost killed his previous Jinchuriki. Now it seems I don't need to find Yuno anymore. In that instant, Kisame took off towards Naruto. Naruto barely had any time to react, as Kisame brought his sword down in an overhead chop. Naruto managed to roll out of the way, sending another water blast from his fingertips towards Kisame. The shark-like man didn't even bother to use his sword to dodge the attack, as he took the water jutsu head up, powering through as he thrusted his sword forward. Naruto was no match for the man's superior speed, as the sword smacked against his face, sending him billowing to the floor. Naruto's head snapped off the ground painfully, as he felt the sword bite his stomach again this time. Naruto scowled. He had had enough. With a burst of chakra, he activated his Sharingan, and quickly formed a hand sign. The blood from his new wound started to float upwards, as it formed a shuriken, and sent itself towards Kasame's hand that was holding the hilt of Samehada. Kasame jumped back, avoiding the attack, taking Samehada with him as Naruto jumped back to his feet, the wounds in his stomach already healing thanks to his blood jutsu. Naruto, that sword, it had taken some of my chakra just now. They definitely know. Naruto cursed as he tightened his fist. He watched as Samehada grew a bit more in size. With a burst, Naruto raced off towards Kasame, aiming a punch to the man's head. Kasame brought his forearm to block the attack. Without hesitating, Naruto sent another punch his way, sticking to the same side, forcing Kasame to duck out of harm's way. Kasame widened his eyes as he ducked down, barely having enough time to move his head out of the way from another blood shuriken. Using his momentum, Kasame brought his elbow upwards into Naruto's gut. But much to his surprise, Naruto managed to catch his elbow, with much more force this time. Naruto bent his elbow back, as Kasame stifled a scream of pain as he felt his elbow leave his socket, as Naruto broke his arm with one swift motion. Kasame growled in annoyance as he brooded through the pain and brought his leg forward, sweeping Naruto's legs. Again, much to his surprise, Naruto managed to jump over his legs, flipping over and sending a downwards kick into the man's stomach. Kasame gasped in pain as he spit out globs of blood from his mouth. He didn't have time to react due to the pain, and with a yell, Naruto formed a singular seal as the gobs of blood Kasame had just spit out formed into sendan and cut themselves deep into Kasame's shoulders. Kasame was angry. With a loud roar, he brought Samehada forward, forcing Naruto to shunshine away. Kasame huffed irritably as he snapped his arm back into place. He was getting pissed now. Samehada quickly ate away at the blood in his wounds as Kasame performed a quick water jutsu. Water-style Water Dragon Jutsu. Water-style Water Dragon Jutsu. Both shinobi yelled simultaneously as two large identical dragons of water crashed into each other. Kasame scowled as the large beats collided in the air as a loud splash directed his attention to his left. Naruto jumped through the water with a crazed expression on his face, his Sharingan spinning widely as Kasame felt his eyes widen again. This was all the hesitation Naruto needed as the kwani in his hand slipped past Kasame and dug itself deep into the man's chest. Naruto was shocked, however, as the second he cut deep into Kasame, the shark-like man bursted into electricity. Naruto screamed in pain as the electricity coursed through his body. It felt like he was getting stabbed with a million tiny needles as his body fell to the ground. He was covered in water, thanks to the two water dragons, so the electricity had no problem hitting every spot in his body. With his body trembling slightly, he barely had time to roll to the side, dodging another overhead chop, courtesy of Kasame. Kasame had expected this, however, and quickly let go of Samehada and flipped his body over and jumped down onto Naruto. Kasame's elbow almost broke through Naruto's skin, as Naruto gasped in pain again. Naruto used another sunshine as he soared past Kasame, using his blood from his new injury and forming the familiar three-pronged spiral weapon. With a yell, Naruto thrusted it towards Kasame. The shark-like man was prepared, however, and managed to roll back to Samehada just in time to meet the spiral blade head-on. Naruto, seeing his blood blade get absorbed, jumped backwards, forming a chain out of water that wrapped itself around Kasame's wrist, making him lose his balance. Using the opening, Naruto's sunshine in close this time, forming a smaller blood blade and attempting to send it through Kasame. However, Samehada quickly bite the water chain around Kasame, making the jutsu dissolve and giving Kasame enough time to duck out of the way of the oncoming blade. Kasame was still off balance, thanks to his water chain. Using his advantage, he dissolved his own blood jutsu and landed a sharp punch to Kasame's injured arm, forcing Kasame's body buckled down in pain. Kasame, however, caught Naruto off guard. With his free arm, he dropped Samehada and charged into Naruto, sending them both down to the floor. Naruto scowled as Kasame sent a mean right hook to his cheek. Blood flew from Naruto's mouth as he grinned. Kicking upwards, he managed to jump away from Kasame. They locked eyes for a moment, and Kasame felt himself growing more and more annoyed at the boy's smirk. He stayed silent, however, as he watched a thick trickle of blood fall down his Sharingan eye. Then a senbon was flying his way. Kasame almost laughed at the pathetic throw, but the laugh that was coming alive quickly died in his throat as he found himself unable to move his eyes away from the blood senbon that was flying his way. He tried to snap his head towards the sound of Naruto but found it impossible to do so. And without a second thought, he had a surging pain in the center of his body once again. He didn't try and fight back the sound of pain that pushed past his lips as he was finally able to look back at Naruto. He was breathing heavily as a large spear made out of blood found itself pierced through his body. Kasame's mouth exploded in blood as he took a step back in pain. He looked at the tired blonde in front of him. Naruto was trying to not let his fatigue show. He had used up almost the full 5 seconds of his misdirection, and he was already low on chakra, thanks to the amount of blood jutsu he had used in the fight. He was starting to feel the effects on his body, as he barely had the energy to even be standing. He shut his Sharingan eye to conserve as much chakra as he could, as he watched Kasame fall down on one knee. Naruto stayed still for a moment, staring at the hunched-over body of Kasame with a sense of relief. He had done it. He had actually managed to kill a real Akatsuki member. This felt surreal for the blonde. He knew he had grown stronger, but this destroyed any doubts he was having. Naruto breathed out a sigh as he held his sore stomach. He wondered if Kisei and Sasori were okay. Hopefully they hadn't run into Kasame's partner. All his thoughts died in his mind as he felt a sharp pang run through his leg. He winced pain as he looked down to see the Samehada latch itself onto his leg. He howled as the teeth sunk deeper into him, making blood leak out from the wound. Naruto huffed as he tried to shake the sword off of him, and nothing had prepared him for what would have happened next. Kasame's hand reached forward, grabbing a hold of Naruto's blonde spiky hair. Naruto looked on in shock as he was brought face to face with Kasame. The man growled evilly. Naruto felt himself gasp for air as the scaly blue sword tightened its grip around his neck. He tried his best to channel enough chakra to use a sunshine, but found it impossible as the sharp teeth of Samehada once again plunged themselves deep into Naruto's stomach. And Naruto, this isn't good. Next time, try not to miss my heart, Kasame said, mocking Naruto as he slapped Naruto across the face. Samehada sunk its teeth deeper into Naruto's stomach, making blood pool out of Naruto. Naruto found it impossible to even mold his chakra as Samehada stayed latched onto him, and the moment he had tried to channel Isabu's chakra, Samehada sucked it out of him, making Isabu widen his lone eye in fear. You broke my arm. You managed to piss off Samehada? Piss me off. And you almost killed me. I don't even care who you are, or why you have a Sharingan, or how the Sanbi got sealed into you. But, Kasame said, letting go of the blonde hair as Samehada lifted Naruto upwards. Naruto tried his best to fight back, but everything seemed futile, since the sword was making it impossible to do so. His vision was beginning to get hazy, his eyes squinting to even look ahead of him to make out an even single shape or person. The only thing he could see was the imposing silhouette of Kisame as he stood across from him, looking down at Naruto like he was some sort of prey. All noise started to become a muffled mess as Samehada gripped tighter around his neck. Naruto raised his hand to try and pry the sword away, but the moment his hand came into contact with Samehada, he felt his chakra get sucked away even further. Naruto blinked as he could vaguely see Kisame reach into his pouch, but couldn't see what he took out. Naruto couldn't even hear what Isabu was screaming anymore. Everything had started to fade away from him, as he gasped for just an ounce of oxygen. A silent scream forced itself from Naruto's mouth as he felt Kisame's hand slam itself into his lower midriff. He could now faintly hear the screams of Isabu, as he felt his blue eyes start to roll themselves backwards. "I guess for your punishment, you won't mind if I take that biju, would you?" With Sasori. With a loud roar, Sasori charged his puppet forward, the barrels of its arms spinning crazily as a large plum of fire soared out from arms and made their way to the Uchiha. Itachi kept his face impassive as he jumped away from the flames, dodging the insane heat of the attack. He was unprepared as the second he jumped away, he was met face to face with a second puppet, whose mouth unhinged itself, shooting out a large amount of senbon trying to cut up the Uchiha. Itachi couldn't go anywhere as he felt the 100 needles pierce themselves into his body with a sickening, squelching sound. Sasori didn't have time to relish in his victory, as Itachi's body then started to break apart into several large crows and fly themselves towards him. Sasori, reacting quickly, brought his first puppet his way, shielding himself from the crows as they pecked at him and his puppet ruthlessly. Sasori grimaced as he felt one of the blackbirds nick his shoulder. Without warning, he twitched his fingers again as his second puppet sprang to life again. The wooden creature looked to break in a large gust of air as a large dragon made of wind formed at his mouth and took off towards Sasori and the birds. With another twitch of his index finger, the dragon split apart as it reached Sasori, only to retake shape as it passed the redhead and forcefully swept up the crows and sent them flying off into a faraway tree. Sasori, sensing something to his left, brought the puppet to shield him from a swift kick from Itachi. Sasori scowled as the wood of his puppet started to crack from the power of Itachi's attack. Twitching again, he pulled back on the strings, making the first puppet soar itself backwards at Itachi. This time, Itachi gave a small scowl as he jumped into the air to avoid the attack, sending an overhead kick to the puppet's head and smashing the wood beneath him to bits. Sasori clicked his tongue as he retreated backwards from the Uchiha. He never liked it when one of his creations broke. It had always felt like a part of him was breaking any time someone destroyed the wooden puppets. With a scowl, his second puppet came flying next to him, easily towering over Sasori with its arm outstretched, showing the two tubes to Itachi. The Uchiha just kicked away the broken puppet at his foot. As he looked at Sasori, he wanted to raise an eyebrow at Sasori's fighting style. The puppet master had been much more aggressive than he usually was. He even initiated most of the attacks, something Sasori had never done before. Also, he was using basic puppets that most Chunin and Tsunagakure had purchased after being allowed access to the special store. It was strange, and Itachi for once couldn't put together his old friend's change of personality and ideals. "You have changed, Sasori." Sasori just scowled at Itachi. "Wrong. This is who I've always been. It's you guys that never bothered to look at anything else." Itachi moved slightly, expecting the puppet user to attack like he usually had. But much to the Uchiha's surprise, no attack came. This time Itachi's brow did raise in a small amount of confusion. He didn't know what to think. Sasori was known for his mocking, for his superior tactics in the battlefield that overshadowed even veteran shinobi. Then what was he doing? Sasori noticed a part of Itachi's mask crack the longer he tried to analyze him. His plan was working. The puppet master grinned as he barely noticed the small twitch of the Uchiha's arm. There it was. With a laugh, Sasori sent his puppet flying towards Itachi. The Uchiha was more than ready to block the attack as the puppet grew closer to him, but was surprised when the puppet's arms folded back to normal. "Now, Kisei," Itachi felt his eyes go wide slightly, as a sharp pain ignited in his left leg. He winced from the random pain, only to barely glance over to see the girl he had put under a genjutsu early to be standing tall. She was breathing heavy with her arm outstretched towards him. The pain in his leg only seemed to get worse as the puppet produced a blade from its mouth and plunged it deep into Itachi's gut. Sasori, noticing something was wrong, forced his hand backwards, but it was too late. The body of Itachi then exploded, sending his puppet flying back into tiny bits and pieces back at Sasori. An exploding clone? Damn it! Sasori cursed to himself as he glared as the tall form of Itachi walked himself back to the two of them. Itachi masked his face as he moved his cloak open to see his now heavily bleeding leg. After he had switched places with his exploding clone, he was shocked to see several kunai from his pouch had forcefully ripped free of their prison and dug themselves deep into his leg, courtesy of the young girl he didn't recognize. He was lucky she looked to be inexperienced, because if she was stronger, then he might not even have this leg anymore. I see. You were buying time for the girl here. I should have seen this coming. Enough of this, Itachi. You aren't going to leave here alive, and you definitely aren't getting Kisei or Naruto. Sasori growled, and for the first time in the redhead's life, he watched as Itachi's Sharingan faded away from his eyes. Sasori couldn't even form thoughts as he watched the Dujutsu vanish. For the many years he had known the Uchiha missing nin, he always, no matter what, had his Sharingan active. Itachi felt his pulse quicken slightly, as the name of a familiar blonde boy reached his ears. A name he hadn't heard in a long time, close to years, ever since he had abandoned Konoha. Just then the face of a slightly older Uchiha flashed in his head, a head of messy black hair with a securely tied Konoha headband around his forehead, and the most gentle and full of joy smile he had ever seen. Itachi, you have to come and visit me and Naruto one day. The kid has so much fighting spirit and is so dedicated, and with my training he will no doubt be one of the strongest shinobi ever. Itachi blinked at the memory that had resurfaced. Shisui's words echoed in his mind like they had done years ago. Shisui almost every day would return back to the Uchiha compound with a smile on his face, and would then spend hours and hours bragging about Naruto. He never had said anything bad about the Namikaze. In fact, Shisui never had stopped talking about Naruto. Even when the two Uchiha would train together, Shisui always found new things to teach Naruto, and would break out into a huge smile. Itachi smiled slightly at the memory. Shisui cared more for Naruto than he had for the entire Uchiha clan. That much was plainly obvious. To this day, Itachi was still unsure on what had happened to Shisui. He wasn't there during the night of the massacre, and was slightly uncertain if the boy was dead or not. But Naruto was alive, and that was enough for Itachi. I see. Naruto is with you? He watched as the two in front of him tensed slightly. Kisei growled as she took a confident step towards the taller Uchiha. If you want to get to Naruni, then you'll have to get through me. Itachi looked a little amused at the girl's declaration, but quickly hid the emotion. Itachi was still completely unsure about Sasori's change of heart, and Kisei was a little interesting to him. She seemed to have the power to control metal, hence the kunai that he found in his legs just moments ago. The situation was confusing and brought up more questions than answers. And before he could continue his train of thought, a large chakra signature became visible to the three shinobi in the clearing. Itachi looked up with a raised eyebrow as Kasame landed next to him, and his confusion only grew as he saw the state the shark-like man seemed to be in. Kasame scowled at Itachi's raised eyebrow and looked back at Sasori in a small amount of surprise. He didn't think the puppet boy would be here as well. He was about to greet the redhead when he was the injuries on both of his teammates. Quickly putting two and two together, he went ahead to grab Samahata, but was stopped when Itachi put a hand on his shoulder. Enough, Kasame. We are done here, Itachi said, surprising everyone. Kasame was about to protest, but Itachi's Sharingan flared back to life and glared darkly at Kasame. Kasame reluctantly nodded but managed to put a grin on his face. His shark-like teeth glinted and ignored the blood that leaked down his chest. He didn't even bother to clean himself up after his fight with the boy. Very well, Itachi. Our mission is completed after all. Sasori felt his heart drop at the words. A worried expression took over his face. Itachi looked somewhat confused when Kisame grabbed onto his shoulder rather hard. Kisame reached into his pouch to reveal a small-sized urn that was seated comfortable in his palm. Sasori felt his blood run cold at the sight. Pure dread washed over him, and the wicked smirk across Kisame's face told the redhead all he needed to know. "You fucking bastard." Sasori screeched and sent his puppet flying towards the Akatsuki members. He didn't even hesitate, as he shot out the largest fireball he could muster at the two. The ball of fire was so large that it had caught the wind and had got taken away into the forest. Sasori didn't even care, as he watched the trees go up into flames and soon spread itself out, engulfing the whole forest. The smoke had finally started to clear, and Itachi and Kisame were nowhere to be found. Their chakra signatures completely vanished, and Sasori felt his blood boil in anger. While internally he was angry, his face showed a heavy amount of worry as he cut connection to his puppet. Sasori wasted no time as he ran towards Kisei and grabbed the confused girl by the shoulders. Kisei was alarmed as she watched the fire spread quickly down the forest. Trees were starting to turn to ash, and she could start to see several wild animals starting to run away from the bright flames. She was scared when Sasori had gripped tightly onto her shoulders. The redhead's eyes looked to be glossed over slightly, worrying Kisei even further. "Kisei, you have to get to Naruto. This is important," he yelled, making Kisei jump in surprise. Her heart began to feel heavy as she grew more and more concerned. "Naruni? No time, Kisei. Here, take these. I have to go and find Yuno and Atarashi and tell them about this right away," Sasori said frantically as he reached into his cloak and pulled out two identical black and red scrolls. He pushed them into the scared girl's hands, and she fumbled to grab a hold of the scrolls. She held them tightly to her chest and jumped slightly once another explosion reached her ears. Both Kisei and Sasori looked on in surprise as the mountain then exploded, sending rocks tumbling down and impacting onto the burning forest around them. Kisei finally put together what was happening as a few tears started to leak out of her eyes. Sasori looked just as panicked as he grabbed the girl's face to look at her golden eyes. "Whatever you do, Kis, make sure he is okay. The red scroll is a healer puppet, just in case you need it. The black is the strongest puppet I have made. Use it to keep you safe," he said, and Kisei frantically nodded, and without warning, Kisei took off back into the cabin, making her way towards Naruto. Sasori wanted to go after Naruto as well, but he had to report this back to Atarashi as soon as possible. This was important. The fate of the world was now in the line, and the second Sasori took a step forward, he had to shield himself as a large dust cloud observed his vision from a tree that had just fallen over. Sasori grew more tense as several smaller chakra signatures became visible. Snapping his head over to their general direction, he scolded. It seemed Kumo had already caught wind of the forest fire and were starting to make their way towards it. With one last worried look back at the mountain, he then vanished, traveling at near inhumane speed to make it to the Atarashi base. He just hoped everything was okay. Kisei was running as fast as her legs could take as she sprinted down the cabin's secret hallway. Her heart was pounding. She felt like it was going to burst any second the longer it took her to reach Naruto. She was scared. No, she was absolutely terrified. She still wasn't entirely sure what had happened to Naruto, but she knew it was something bad. Sasori-sensei looked mortified the second the blue man took out an urn and smirked. Kisei had no idea what it was, but she was sure that Naruto was in trouble. She channeled as much chakra as she could into her feet to run faster, the more she thought about Naruto in danger. Kisei's heart skipped a beat as she finally saw the door to the training hall of the base. She pushed past the wooden door, tearing it off her hinges, and sent it flying into the room. Kisei didn't even care that her shoulder was now throbbing in pain as she looked on shocked in the room. She was forced to cover her eyes as another small explosion rocked the cavern. She lost her footing and fell to the ground as the cave started to shake. Once the shaking finally stopped, she was able to look around the room. There was water almost everywhere as it soaked the ground. She saw several pools of blood scattered randomly, and she followed the trail until her heart dropped down into her stomach. Fresh tears formed in her eyes as she gasped loudly. She tried to get to her feet, but the second her foot moved forward, she slipped in the puddle of water and fell face first onto the floor. She ignored the pain as she tried again, forcing her body forward as she slid past the pools of blood as her throat turned dry. More tears fell down her face as she finally made her way to the center of the room. "Naruni?" Kisei yelled, her voice hoarse as she skidded across the floor, only to see Naruto's body face down, his face slightly submerged in a small pool of water. His face was paler than a ghost as she reached out to him. She called his name again but got no response. Her whole body started to tremble as she yelled it again, once again getting no response as she grabbed his shoulders and tried to shake him awake. Kisei sobbed his name again as she flipped him over onto his back, her eyes going wide as she looked at his heavily torn shirt, revealing his now deathly pale skin. She traced over his stomach, her fingers softly going over the large bite gash that he now had on his right side of his stomach. Kisei was freaking out. She ignored as part of the ceiling had caved in, falling down across the room and sending a small little shockwave across the room. Kisei's mind was running a mile a minute as she put her 2 index fingers under his jaw. At first, she felt her heart almost exploded when she felt his pulse react to her touch. It was faint, so faint that she was afraid it was just her imagination. Making sure it was real, she quickly unraveled the red scroll Sasori had given her and unsealed the small puppet that resided inside. The puppet was indeed small, about the size of Kisei as it wore a typical nurse's uniform. The strange thing about this puppet, however, was its face. It looked way more human than any of the other puppets that Kisei had seen, but she didn't worry about that now. She didn't even bother to connect her chakra strings to the nurse puppet as she ordered it to start to heal the blonde. The puppet's hands started to glow a light green color as they moved around the blonde's body. Kisei watched in loud distress as Naruto remained unmoving, checking his pulse again just to make sure he was in fact alive. Satisfied that she had felt it, she let go and let the puppet do its thing. She wiped her eyes clean, trying to rid herself of any more tears as a soft sound of footsteps reached her ears. A heavy sense of anxiety coursed through her as her head snapped back to the entrance of the cave. She cursed herself for not remembering to close the entrance in the fridge. She stood up on shaky legs as she turned to meet more than a dozen Kumo shinobi who had just walked into the room. Kisei put up her bravest face as she unsealed the black scroll in her hand. Her hands were shaking, and she felt her face crack slightly as the Kumo shinobi started to laugh at seeing the girl look so terrified. The shinobi in front walked forward. He looked like the leader of the pact as he grinned evilly at the young girl, his eyes glancing between her and the boy who was getting healed. "Are you two responsible for this wildfire?" Kisei scarredly shook her head. It was partially true. It was technically only Sasori who had started the fire. She was only a spectator. The man huffed in annoyance as he looked around the destroyed cave. Grinning again, he shrugged his shoulders. "Well, you look pretty responsible." Kisei felt her eyes widen in fear as she instinctively channeled her chakra into the scroll. The man stopped his walk forward as a large poof echoed itself into the clearing. The man in front took a hesitant step back as a towering figure floated over him. He took a hesitant step back in pure disbelief as fear laced itself into his veins. His group of shinobi had done the same, some even falling down in fear at the sight in front of them. The puppet that stood towering over them was large, easily taller than anyone in the room, as dark purplish-black hair stood spiky on all sides of his head. It was wearing a long white poncho with a midnight black shirt underneath that went all the way down to his wooden ankles. The puppet took in a sharp intake of breath before exhaling out. As he did so, a thick black particle substance flowed freely from his mouth as Kie snapped her head upwards. Her golden eyes wiped of all fear and were now replaced with sheer confidence. Even using her magnet release, this puppet, she could tell it was different than any other one she had ever controlled. Power felt like it was rolling off of her as the black substance leaked out of the puppet's mouth and started to circle around Kisei. She scowled darkly as she raised her hand forward, channeling much more chakra than necessary, as the wood around the puppet started to change color. Gone was the once nice brown wooden color, now a deep black replaced it. Kisei heard a few screams of fear echo in the room, and she didn't care. With a snap of her hand, the puppet launched itself in the air. The black substance seemed to take form in hundreds of spikes as it rained down on the Kumo shinobi. Screams of pain bounced off the cave walls as she watched the shinobu get ripped apart from her new puppet. Blood flew from open wounds and mixed itself with the pools of water. Her voice was cold as she spoke, her eyes going void of any emotion as she felt herself almost become one with the puppet. With another twist of her finger, the puppet above her swiped itself down, forming more spikes as it impaled several of the Kumo shinobi. Their screaming didn't even faze Kisei as she shut her hand tightly, as a loud muffled howl reached her ears. No one, and I mean no one, will harm Naruni. Thank you for watching part 5 of What If Naruto Was Neglected by His Family and Had Every Elemental Bloodline. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Anime T23 for more exciting what-if scenarios and anime content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next episode.